Good afternoon, everyone. So we once again welcome you all to another important and very relevant session on ways to optimize maintenance cost of material handling equipment. Now, let me very quickly give a broad overview of this platform for people who are joining us for the first time. This is the Storage and Handling Knowledge series platform where we try to encapsulate uh, the learnings of past almost 5 decades in this industry and sharing it with you as various knowledge nuggets. We have been holding these sessions month after month since the last almost 18 months now, and we are really thankful and humbled by the very positive response extended by all of you to this platform. We intend to continue this journey with you and keep sharing important information and knowledge nuggets with you on various topics pertaining to material handling and storage industry. Now, on this platform, as you know, that we have been covering various aspects, right from basics of equipment, the different type of equipment, the maintenance the maintenance practices, uh, aspects such as order picking, some things which people can take a value out of. And we have also invited sort of guest speakers on this platform to talk a bit deeper about certain componentry which can be a big value add to you. We have hosted a panel discussion to get viewpoints from various industry leaders on this platform. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that this has become a very thriving and engaging platform for various members of this industry, and we intend to make it more robust and more engaging as we move ahead. Now, in today's session is actually the second part and the concluding part of the session that we held last month, which was on right maintenance practices of MHE. Now, in that session, as you would be aware that we had covered various aspects like total cost of ownership, what are the various components of total cost of ownership, and we also spoke about that there is no like a thumb rule for a maintenance practice because it is totally dependent on the type of equipment, the type of application, whether it is based on throughput, how the layout is there, what is the material flow. There are so many aspects. What is the fleet size? So there are so many aspects which define a right maintenance practice for the application. So we covered it in a very broad way. Then we also spoke about the periodic maintenance, predictive maintenance, the maintenance, the breakdown maintenance that are applicable for material handling equipment, and we spoke about it in a very broad sense to give all of you an overview of what are the various maintenance aspects of material handling equipment. We also spoke about execution practices. Today we are going a bit deeper and we are trying to look at how to optimize these maintenance costs. So last time it was about what are the practices. Today we are going to talk about how to optimize the cost, and today we are going to talk about certain specific componentry or rather assemblies in a very simple, easy to understand way. So that you are able to take away some good pieces of information which can be useful for you in trying to better maintain your equipment. Now, for today, let me introduce you to the speaker, Mr. Bhaskar Nandi, who is with Godrej Material Handling since almost 8 years now and having an experience of more than a decade in a similar industry, earth moving industry. And he has been very instrumental in setting up the right maintenance practices for the company. He is the technical support for the front end team. He has a good knowledge of IoT and IoT based data analytics. And he has developed quite a few maintenance practices which make sure that the equipment is kept running in every type of environment. So we could not have got a better speaker to talk about today's topic, which is ways to optimize maintenance cost of material handling equipment. Before I hand over the forum to Mr. Bhaskar Nandi, a few requests. Please post your questions in the chat box, and we would also request if you could put your name instead of posting it anonymously, because that will help us to get back to you in case we are not able to take care of all the questions looking at the paucity of time. So we would request you to please put your name and the name of your company while you are posting your question. With that, I would invite Mr. Bhaskar Nandi to take us through this interesting topic. Over to you, Mr. Nandi.
Thank you, Abhishek sir. Thanks a lot for that warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So just before start, I would like to give you a brief idea of my credentials. Actually, I have been working in this industry of earth moving and material handling industry since 2010 now, so it's all over a decade. And earlier, before Godrej, I was with in the crane industry looking at the maintenance of those equipments. After that, joining in Godrej, I have not only taken care of the products which are manufactured by us, but I also look after the equipments which we sell as our traded partners like Hubtex, Merlo, cleaning machines, access equipments, and all. So all in all, this is what I have been doing since then. And being on the field for the last 10-11 years, I have seen a few practices that people are following, that people are going through. And based on that, I would like to share my experience with you on how you can maintain your equipment better, and at the same time how you will be able to optimize your maintenance cost. So before we move on to the actual topic of today, I would like to give you a recap of what we discussed in our past webinar. So in that we talked about the cost of ownership, which has different sort of components. Like there is a purchase cost, there is some energy cost, there is some operator cost, and service cost. Now the service cost is one of the biggest chunk, and that is the place where we can optimize. That is a place where people kind of tend to take advantage of or neglect, and that is the cost which actually affect your energy cost, your performance of the machine, your life cycle of the machine, and so on and so forth. After that, we discussed on what are the different factors that affect your maintenance. There is something which is very specific to the region that you are working in, the very specific kind of applications that you are working in, the kind of throughput that you want from your equipment. And then again, it depends on what kind of equipment mix you have at your site. So these are the all things which gives you those unique formulas for bringing out the best maintenance practice for you. And that is the place we like to help you, and we like to handhold you for taking this forward to get the most of your machine. Then we talked about what are the different type of maintenance: the breakdown maintenance, the planned maintenance, predictive maintenance. What are these, and what kind of support these needs? So in some kind of maintenance, you would need the support of the OEM. In some, you can do it yourself, or you can take guidance or some kind of technical assistance and something. And in some parts, you would need parts and everything. So how these things affect the cost of ownership, how these things affects your maintenance schedule, and how you tend to know it better so that you can give the correct kind of maintenance to your equipment. Then we also shared some best practices with you. in our last webinar. So this was just a recap for those who may not have gone through the last webinar. If you want to go through that, you can visit our YouTube channel. It's available over there, and you can always refer to these videos, these webinars over there for your benefit. Now, coming back to our today's topic. So today we will be focusing on the ways how we can optimize the maintenance spend. So what is that we call a maintenance spend? First, we need to understand that. So I will give you an analogy, like just think of it as a human body. Now, every human lives in a different kind of situation, different kind of environment, different kind of work they are doing, different kind of food they are eating, and means everybody has a different need. So everybody needs a specific kind of attention towards it. So that is one part. Second part is, but even given all these variabilities, I would say that human body, there are some general specifics. Like we all know that in the morning you should go for a walk, you should do some exercise, some yoga, or you can go to you should eat healthy, you should be hygienic, you should now you should visit your dentist to get your teeth checked up, or anything and everything, so which revolves around a body. Now, few of us do that, few of us don't do that, but at last, suppose you today think of starting to going to walk tomorrow, and but tomorrow you will not be able to get that what difference had it made to you. It will only be reflected, or you will only get to know about it in a long span of time. So that is one part. Now, second part is there are a few, like as I told you, that there are a few specific guidelines, sorry, a generalized guidelines for everyone, that everyone should follow. Now, because of our daily routine, or negligency, or laziness, or any kind of it, we do some, we don't do some, we think of doing it tomorrow or starting it the next new year, something like that. So because of that, in the long run, we see that the weaker sections of our body is getting into some kind of trouble. And when that alarm rings, then only we start to take care of it or to work towards it. But at that point of time, the damage is already done. So that is the part which I am going to talk about tomorrow, which is generalized. See, like we have a product mix of diesel equipments, battery powered equipments, warehousing equipments. So all these kind of products we have, access equipment, rough terrain equipment, and everything. But all these needs and also from different kind of OEMs. So all these products need specific maintenance kind of thing, and there we are to help you. But there is something which is common for all these equipments. For if you are following the guidelines that we are going to talk about today, then this will be generalized for all, and you can bring down the maintenance spend which you will be doing on these equipment through the life to certain extent. So that is what the objective of today is. I will not be sharing anything which is very much specific to any site conditions or applications or a certain product, but more into the generalized view. So talking about that and going into the topic in deeper, we need to understand that when we are talking about maintenance, like for a human body also, we need to follow certain discipline. Without discipline, the maintenance is of no use. We also touched on this aspect in our past webinar, and here also we are telling you this, that when you are disciplined and when you have the will to do it, then only the maintenance schedule which is followed by you or which is curated for you is going to help you. So in that, the first and the foremost thing that you need to follow is your visual inspection. So visual inspection is one thing which needs to be done before every shift. So we call it pre-shift visual inspection. And then there is something which needs to be done weekly. Now you will listen to this visual inspection thing every now and then in the next slides. So visual inspection kind of keeps you in that discipline zone where you are aware of what you are doing and what is going on with your equipment. Just going around your equipment once a day before starting the shift can give you a lot of insights into what your equipment is facing, what your equipment needs, and what your equipment actually can deliver you. So these are some of the things that we do in visual inspection. There is also a checklist that is available with every operator's manual of the machine, and that gives you what you need to do and how the operators, how the maintenance staff should follow the basic visual checks before every shift. And it has been also established by surveys that only visual inspection can reduce your unplanned breakdowns by 20%. Also, visual inspection is the first and foremost thing which helps you eliminate any kind of safety threats. So if there is any wire dangling down or there is any oil leakage, your wheel bolts may be loose. So all these kind of things can be seen when you are visually inspecting the machine, going around the machine before a shift. The hoses can be the hoses have been may have been ruptured and they are leaking, so they help you eliminate any kind of safety threats that you may be means eliminating those safety threats. Then there are some weekly checks that the weekly checks are a bit into the deeper zone where you need to check the levels or tighten the bolts or something like that. So these are the two interval checks that is very essential and that keeps you in the discipline zone of following the maintenance. Now said that, we can divide the metal handling equipment into different modules, and with respect of those modules we can see what kind of maintenance goes into it, what kind of uh, components goes into it, and how can we work towards getting the best out of those. So the first component we will be talking about, or the first module we will be talking about, is the energy source. So what is the energy source, how it works, and what kind of maintenance goes into it. The second one is drivetrain, the wheels and brakes, hydraulics, and load handlers. Load handlers mean the load carrying members of the metal handling equipment. Again, I would like to focus on the thing that these are generalized for all the equipment and product mix that we have. It may be a diesel powered equipment, it may be a battery powered equipment, it may be a warehousing equipment and access equipment or rough terrain equipment, but these modules remain same for all of them, and the practices or the ways we are going to talk about is same for almost all of them. So first, going into the energy sources. Now, what is energy source? Energy for some power. So where does that power come from? Now, in our diesel power equipment, it comes from the IC engine. Now, what is an IC engine? IC engine is basically a module which converts your fuel into kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy helps us to operate the machine and do the operations of the machine. Now, when we are using this machine, we have 3 or 4 things attached to it. One is your fuel pump, which picks up the fuel from the tank and delivers it to the engine block. Second is your cooling system, your air intake system, and the exhaust system. Now, when we are talking about all these parts, we need to see how these parts which are attached to the engine are working, and how they are performing, and how they can give you the best out of the engine. Now, we have seen in the market or in the field that there is a practice of using adulterated fuel, like so we need to see what is adulteration. When some component or when some particles or some impurities mix into the fuel, it becomes adulterated. So how can that happen? See, our equipments are not used on the road, and they are inside the industry premises. And when we are filling fuel, it is not from the petrol pump or the diesel pump, it is from a stored a stored container which is filled by the maintenance staff or the staff of the your staffs, and then it is stored in your premises, and from there the diesel is taken into the IC engine. Now, how hygienically are you handling the fuel? How are you labeling it properly, or is there some kind of mixture? Is it prone to rainfall and dusty environment? So all these things can adulterate the engine, can make the diesel very impure, and that impure oil can seriously damage the pistons. They can cause corrosion, they can cause the liners to burn out. So using unadulterated fuel is very important. The second point I want to talk to you is choosing the right fuel. So every engine has a fuel recommended by the OEM. Like for our case, we recommend high speed diesel. Now in the market or in the field, we see that there are people who use pure high speed diesel, but then they at some places they mix high speed diesel and LDO, or at some places they use only LDO, or at some places they use some other kind of mix or with some other kind of additives. Now understand, in very small, means if you see in a very short span of time, it may give you that my engine is working perfect, or it is working in more efficiently, but in long run it is destroying your engine. One more thing I would like to tell you over here, that energy source is one of the modules where you spend the most of your maintenance or service cost, because your the fuel cost is attached to it, and this energy source, the IC engine, is a costly part. Whenever if there is a maintenance required for this part, it is going to be on the higher side only. So using the right fuel and using unadulterated fuel, using proper coolant, which is recommended by the OEM, and changing the air cleaners properly, and not cleaning the air cleaners. You need to change it periodically or whenever it is needed. That gives you the best performance out of your engine in the long run, and that can help you in reducing your maintenance cost at a very huge rate. Now, one more thing about the air filter element, we see at very dusty environments, like at mines, or where the equipment is working in very rough terrains, the dust is very high. At that point of time, it's recommended that whenever you see your air filters are choked, you should replace it instead of cleaning it. That helps your engine to last longer and give you better performance. The second energy source that we will be talking about is your battery. So this is an automotive battery that we use in our battery powered forklift and our warehousing equipments. So what is a battery? Battery is a bank of cells which are connected in series. So battery is not one unit, but several different cells which are connected in series to make one battery. Now, going into the battery, we should ensure that ensure the cleanliness of the battery, the routine checks of electrolyte gravity, specific gravity, and the Purcell voltage is very important. Cleaning the sulfation. Now, how you will know that there is a sulfation deposit on the battery? It can only be known when you are doing your visual inspection on a daily basis or weekly basis, when you are cleaning the battery. Now, at that point of time, if you are seeing some kind of sulfation, you will clean it up. You will smear some Vaseline jelly and again use it. So that the sulfation can destroy your terminals, and in some point of time, your battery is going to be degrading its life. Now, one more thing regarding that, regarding the battery, is that the charge and discharge cycle. Now, as of now, we are using mostly we are using the lead acid batteries, which do not allow opportunity charging. So we always guide and we always recommend it to use it as per the charge and discharge cycle, which is charging it fully and discharging it up to 80% of the capacity. So if we follow this cycle, we will get the most out of the battery, where there is no deep discharging of the battery, there is no overstretching of the battery, and your battery cells remain in very healthy conditions. One more important thing, this is the most important thing I will say, is equalizing charging the battery. So when we are charging the battery, our chargers have two modes. One is full mode and one is your equalizing mode. Now what full mode does is pushes a lot of current which charges your battery for daily usage. Now depending on what kind of charger you are using, it takes around 8 to 11 hours to charge a fully charge a battery from 80% discharge. Now what is equalizing charging? Equalizing charging is providing a steady amount of current to the battery which kind of takes, so there are all these cells which are connected together. Now as as us humans, all these cell differs a bit in their wear and tear and in their power. So in some time of usage, these batteries tends to lose their power slowly. So some cells may be a bit weaker than the other ones. So what equalizing charging does is it flows a steady amount of charge and brings all the cells together to a level where they are comparably at the same level. So equalizing charge takes more time to charge, and that brings your battery back into a position where it is at its optimal health position. Now, why am I talking about equalizing charge? Because this is one thing which again joins us back to the discipline. As equalizing charge takes more time than your normal charge, so it needs to be scheduled by the customer. So if you are working 6 days a week and your Sunday is off, so on Saturday evening you can put it on equalizing charge, and on Monday morning you can take it out from the equalizing charge. So that kind of time period is required, or whatever suits your needs, you need to schedule it, and scheduling it gives you that discipline of properly following this equalizing charge patterns. Now at times, because of workload or because of several other variabilities, you may skip. Now skipping again breaks that discipline. Skipping again takes your the battery takes that beating, and once you skip, that becomes a practice and equalizing charging is forgotten. So that is what our experience is in the field. So here, if you are working and if you are scheduling your equalizing charge, that will give you the most out of your battery, and that will improve the life of your battery. Now at places we have seen that normally batteries give 20 to 30% more when they are stored and when they are maintained and charged as per the OEM recommendations. So that is the kind of savings, or that is the kind of maintenance cost reduction that you will be seeing when you are, if you are properly maintaining your battery. Going to the next drivetrain. So on our diesel powered equipments, we have a transmission and then we have an axle. So what is the most sort of mistake that people do when they are using this equipment? Now on our diesel power forklift, if you have seen, we have automatic transmission and we have only two pedals, accelerator pedal and a brake pedal. Now what happens on our car, we use ABC, accelerator, brake and clutch, and our one foot presses the accelerator and brake, the other foot is on the normally operates the clutch. But in case of automatic transmission, as there are two pedals, we have seen and we have experienced that operators tend to keep 1 feet each on accelerator and brake. Now what happens if at the same time you are accelerating as well as you are braking, that that engages your clutch, and that results in wearing out of your internal transmission gear parts. Second point that I would like to highlight over here is it's very important to carry out the transmission in general, all the maintenance, but transmission specific to transmission maintenance, it should be carried out very hygienically. When we are pouring new oil, or when we are changing the filter, or when we are doing any kind of repairs, it's very important that we keep that hygiene, because these are very precise parts, and these any kind of contamination or any kind of dust may lead to a bigger failure in a longer period of time. So the maintenance that is being carried out should be in a very hygienic way. At the same time, the consumables that are being used or the oils that are being used should not be should be of they should be genuine, and they should be from some credible source. So in the electrical part, we have motors and transaxles. So it's very important, and it's highly recommended to check the cable tightness once a week or in the weekly check. We should keep an eye or keep our ears open for any kind of noise. As most of our equipments have switched now to AC motors, we don't have a lot of intervention required into the motor. But if there is any noise that you are hearing, that can means that should ring a bell, and you should contact the OEM. You should contact the nearest service person to come and have a look at it, so that further damages can be prevented. Going into the DC motor, there are carbon brushes which needs to be checked periodically, and they needs to be adjusted or replaced as and when required. Now, one more practice that we have seen is that if you are replacing the carbon brush, you are at times people replace only the carbon brush which has taken the beating, or which has degraded. It's recommended that whenever you change the carbon brush, you change it together. So if there are 2 or 4 carbon brushes, change it together so that they are aligned properly and your motor functions properly. And that's about the motor and the transaxle. Always try to keep the motor compartment clean, because any dust entering inside can destroy or damage your rotors as well as your armatures. So keep it clean. Use pressurized air once a week or in the weekly inspection or weekly maintenance schedule. So if your compartment is very clean, there is no dust going inside the motor, it will work perfectly and you will get the most life out of your motor. Okay, next we are going, we will be taking the module of wheels and brakes. Now, regarding the brakes, there one type of brake is your hydraulic braking, where the force applied by your by the leg is transferred via hydraulic oil to the brake drum. Now, in this kind of braking, the brake liner is pushed to the brake drum, and it stops the equipment. Now, when we are using this, the liner, the brake liner, which is a consumable, is wearing out. Now, during a regular maintenance or during the maintenance, we should replace the brake liner at the given schedule by the OEM for its best effectivity. If we see that no, the liner can work for some time now, and we will not replace it now, we will replace it later, what happens is, if the liner is fully worn out, your brake drum takes a beating, and that is again a costly part which will increase your maintenance cost. So even if your brake liners, when they have worked for its life, whatever it is given, if it is whatever is specified by the OEM, at that particular schedule, the brake liners must be replaced. Next is your EM brakes, which is mostly on our electric metal handling equipment and the warehousing equipment. The same thing happens with the friction plates. Now, when you are using this, the friction plate is wearing out, and the friction plate should be changed with the given time schedule. Now, what happens if there is a brake jam and you think you will not be replacing the friction plate or the liner? So in that case, the brake jamming can happen, and once the brake jams, the energy source, the drivetrain takes all that means it pushes all that power to move to overcome that brake jam, which affect these two parts, and these two parts are then is also wearing out because of not just replacing the brake liners and the EM brakes. So changing the liners, changing the friction plate at time, and adjusting the air gaps is important, and that can save not only your brakes but the your drivetrain as well as the energy source. Now, at times we have seen that when the brake is jammed in electrical equipment, the controller tends to overheat, the motor tends to overheat because they are trying to overcome that brake jamming thing, and the internal parts of the controller can damage. So this cost of liners or the friction plate can affect your controllers to a very large extent, and that is where you will be spending if you are not taking care at the braking place. So next about the wheels. So first is your pneumatic wheels. So before pneumatic wheels, we should ensure the wheel bolt tightness, which is not only necessary for proper movement of the machine, but it is also a safe. It is also to overcome a safety failure that can happen. So during your weekly during your visual inspection on the pre-shift basis, you should see the lock nuts are in place, and during your weekly checks, you should tighten the bolts. For the pneumatic tires, we must keep the air pressure at around 110 psi, which is an industry benchmark. And when our tires are worn out, we should replace it on a timely basis and as soon as possible. So changing tires on a timely basis and keeping the proper air pressure will give you more fuel efficiency, and they will put less pressure on your drivetrain and engine, because as and when your tires are damaged and they have worn out, you need more power to drive the equipment, and as a matter of fact, the fuel efficiency drops. Going to the solid and PU wheel, that again the tightness and tightness of the wheels needs to be mentioned. We should find, as these wheels are more used in a closed condition or warehouse condition, we should see if there are any external causes of damage. Like if there is some rail which is in between in the road, which is protruding out, and your equipment has to go over it again and again. So that tends to damage your tires. If there are any other object which is lying at corners and it comes in path of your equipment, those things affect the longevity of your tires. So we should work towards eliminating such kind of cases. One more thing is when we are working in this closed condition, we have static bands to discharge the static charge which is generated because of the nature of the tires, nature of the wheels. Static generates into in the equipment. Now, if our static band is not very proper and it is not in condition, the static can damage your encoders, again, which are fitted on the motor to give a feedback to the controller about how the motor is working. Is it running at particular RPM, the given RPM, and all that. So the static can damage your encoders, and it can give minor shocks to the operator while ingressing and degressing from the equipment. So the static band should be looked at during your weekly inspection, and if it is kind of damaged, it should be replaced properly. One other thing, again, the damaged tires should be replaced as early as possible and as or on a timely basis, because using damaged tires creates unnecessary vibrations into your machine, and when your machine is vibrating, the drive, again coming back to the drivetrain as well as your energy source or the motors, they takes the beating of this vibration. Those unnecessary vibration gets to these modules, and they can damage these modules also. So spending time and maintaining your tires will not only save you from unnecessary damages to the drivetrain as well as your energy source, but also keep the equipment at optimum performance level. Going to the hydraulics, so till now we have covered the movement of the machine. Going ahead, we will be seeing how your as hydraulics is it's not same, but it's similar in aspect for your diesel equipment as well as your electric equipment. So in the hydraulic, we have all the components like your hydraulic tank, the valve block, the cylinders. So all these things, and these are almost similar for both the category of equipment. So maintaining the cleanliness of the system while operating, as well as while changing oil or changing filter, will give you better performance out of it, because the hydraulic components are very precise components which works in very close tolerances. Now, if any dust or any contaminations gets into the system, they damage the valve blocks or the cylinders heavily. And most of the valve block failures are seen in the field are because of your contamination only. So it's important for us to understand the cleanliness that we need to keep. Like when we're draining oil, that same bottle should not be used for putting oil back into the machine. The funnel should be clean when we are putting oil into the machine. The filters should not be touched with dirty hands or soiled hands or something like that. So the more we keep the hydraulic system clean, the better it will operate, and the lesser we need to spend on these on repair of these bigger blocks. Now the next thing is, we may be operating at a certain MFH at given point of time. Like if we have a 6-meter truck, but we are only using up to 4 meters, 4.5 meters. So what happens? Yes. So what happens is your cylinders are not opening properly or fully. So what we need to do is, before and after working or before and after shift, we recommend to raise your mast fully. What happens is, this takes out the dust which has settled on the piston rod, the exposed portion of the piston rods, and they also helps in lubricating the piston rods and saves it from deterioration and saves it from corrosion. So raise the mast fully once in every shift to clean the dust and to clean the to lubricate the piston rod. So if we are doing this, we are cleaning the system, we are keeping the system clean, we are following the oil change intervals, using proper grade of oil which is recommended by the OEM and suitable for your conditions. So that will enhance the life of your hydraulic components, and you will be spending less on the failures or the spend done on these components. The last module that we are seeing is the load handler, which actually carries the load. So this is a structural member, and visually inspecting it before every shift is very important, so that we can notice any cracks or any fractures which might have come because of wear and tear of the equipment, because of long period of use of the equipment. So those things should be captured at the first instances to prevent any kind of safety issues. And at the first instance, as soon as you notice such if any such issues are noticed, we should contact the contact service or the OEM for fast resolution of the issue and thing. Now, if there is any the support members or the tie bars, if they fail or they are broken, rewelding is never an option for this structural member, because these are load bearing members, and rewelding does not give the structural member the kind of strength that it needs, and it can create some or the other safety issues later in the life of the equipment. Regarding the play of the mast and roller bearing damages, so we should not operate the mast with damaged roller bearing, because they eat up the rail. Now, once your rail is eaten up, you have to replace the rail again, which is a very expensive affair to do. So if you notice any roller bearing damage, it should be replaced immediately. Second, if there is any play in the mast, before making more damage to the mast, we must consult the OEM and get it shimmed properly for removing the play, which gives your mast a longer run. Next, the chain. Now we must keep the chain tightness in a check, and at interval we must replace the chain. Why? Because the chain is attached to the carriage, and a failing chain can again create a very big safety issue. After that, if we are using any kind of attachment to the system, attaching to the system, we must keep a check on the load capacity of the equipment, because attaching any attachment to the system is a fixed load on the equipment, and the capacity of your equipment is lesser by the load that the attachment is weighing. So that is what about the load handlers, where we should, as it is the most important structural member, we should keep a check on how it is performing. Is there any kind of damage to it? Is there any fractures or such kind of things as seen, and necessary actions to be taken at the first instance always. So when we talk about all these modules, and these all knowledge that we have seen for all these modules, they will only work, and they will only work if we are maintaining it, if we are doing it diligently and religiously, and it falls in line with what Tom Robbins has said, that there is birth, there is death, and in between there is maintenance. So we purchase the equipment and there is a scrap. Now this time period between your purchase and scrap can be lengthened or shortened depending on what kind of maintenance and how we are, what kind of attention we are giving to the equipment, what kind of maintenance we are giving to the equipment, and are we taking good care enough of the equipment to give it the life it deserves, give it the life it gets, and get the most performance out of it. So with that, I would like to come to the conclusion slides, where we have talked about the energy source, where use of unadulterated fuel is recommended. You should choose the right fuel as per the engine needs, as per the OEM recommendations. For batteries, we should schedule the equalizing charging, and scheduling equalizing charging can give you up to 20 to 30% more life out of your battery. For drivetrain, the maintenance that is being done should be hygienic. You should lubricate the drivetrain properly, time and during your weekly inspections, during your weekly maintenance tasks. The motor terminal cables tightness are important in the electric part, and they can not only cause they can not only maintain the health of motor and transaxle, but they can also save you from any safety issues of sparking, of getting an arc, or any creating any kind of fire out of it. So if they are loose, it can cause fire also. So that needs to be checked, which saves your motor and transaxle. In wheels and brake, we should change the brake liners and friction plate at the given interval, even if they have not worn out fully, but at given interval it should be changed, so that we get the most out of the effective braking and most out of our equipment. Inflating pneumatic wheels to the correct pressure of 110 psi, and that will give us the optimum fuel efficiency, and keep whole equipment from any kind of vibrations, and keep it more reliable. And replacing damaged tires and wheels at the earliest. In hydraulic system, we should keep the system clean, and we should inspect for any kind of leakages, any kind of hose ruptures timely, and we should arrest them at the first instance. In load handlers, we should inspect the structural member occasionally and weekly, and if there are any play or damages, we should take the correctives at the first instance. Said that all these small basics create huge impact, and these are interrelated. Like if you are means if we are neglecting something on the energy source, that takes the beat. Every other module takes beating. Same for the drivetrain. If you are ignoring or doing less for the drivetrain, the other modules are getting affected. So, and you have seen how a small damage to the wheel can create vibrations into the equipment, and which in lieu damages all other modules. So these are small things. These are very small basic things that we know and that we try to follow, but at times we need some push, at times we need some guidance. And believe me, any OEM in this world will be happy to help you, will be happy to hold your hand to maintain your equipment and show you the right path of how you can maintain to get a better life and better performance out of your equipment. And doing these small things, these basic things, can save a lot of your money, efforts, and your resources in a longer run. And at the time, from the point where we started, the total cost of optimization, doing these small things, you will be able to get the most out of your ownership, total cost of ownership. And not doing this will do the same harm to the equipment as not doing small exercises or drinking lot of water or living a hygienic life does in a human body. So in a longer period of time, when the body ages and the things tend to fail, or the thing degrades, and some of the other issues crops up every time that we experience. So these are all small things, but they create huge impact. And but for all these to happen, we need to start following, and we need to be disciplined, we need to schedule, we need to create awareness among our teams, we need to work together and imbibe the maintenance practices. Then and only then we will be able to improve the life and performance of the equipment with the best and optimized maintenance cost. So finally, before I end, I would like to say that the time spent is the time earned. The time spent is not like you spend more time on maintenance, but how diligently, how religiously, and how disciplined way you are spending your time on maintenance will give you the time you are earning on your equipment. So that's all from my side. If I took some if I overjumped the time, I'm sorry, and I'm open for any questions that are coming.
So thank you so much, Bhaskar. I think it was a very enriching session for all our audience, where in a very simple but effective way, we were able to cover the major componentry of any material handling equipment and what are the basic checkpoints which will help in optimizing the maintenance cost of material handling equipment. So as far as time is concerned, like you were well in time. We could have had another 7 to 10 minutes of useful inputs from you, but I think we can cover it up through the various questions which have flowed in. So I'll be floating these questions off to you, and you can sort of share your thoughts and inputs on the queries asked by the audience. So
Sure.
one of the first queries that has come in is that is the tightness of battery cable impacting the MHE's working and the current which passes to the MHE, like the cable which is, maybe if I try to build on that, the cable which is entangled on the top of the battery, and when you take it out, does it have an impact if it gets tightened on the performance of the battery or the machine?
So, are we talking about the battery which is coming between the battery and the equipment, or the motor and the batteries?
So I would assume because this is coming from the audience, I would assume this is the battery which is from the machine to the battery box, that cable.
Okay, see, any kind of wire that carries current is will tend to affect if it is tight, because if it is tight, it creates unnecessary stresses at the terminals. Now that stress at the terminal can affect the you will not notice it at the first instance, but can affect that the terminal will get damaged, or there will be a sort of because when the truck runs, when the MHE runs, there is always some kind of vibration which is there. So because of that tightness, it may get loose, and after it get loose, there will be arcing, or there will be some kind of sparks which is generating. So it should not be that it is too tight, but again, if it is entangled a bit, it's kind of okay. But if it is too tight, it actually damages the terminal, and then the rippling effect starts actually.
Right. So I would just like to have a follow-up question to that. So in case such a tightness is observed, so what should be the next step that the maintenance person should do?
If such tightness is there, I would say that we need to see how better we means why that tightness is, because is it that the cable is short? If it is short, then yes, replacing the cable is the best option. If that is because of some means the battery is kept in a wrong position, or sorry, not wrong position, but in some other orientation or something, then it should be corrected. If there is it is happening because the the bolts on the terminals are not means the wire is not reaching properly to the terminals, then I would say replacing it with a longer wire or will help.
Okay. Okay. Now the next question which is coming is like, what are the various reasons of controller failure? What can be the various reasons and how can these be avoided?
Okay, so see, the first and foremost reason of controller failure is not, I would say, is, see, when the control, we need to understand when when a controller fails. Controller is nothing but means controller is a module. It takes DC current from the battery and gives AC current to the motor. Now we need to understand that this inversion or this inverter effect which is happening in the controller is not fixed, it's variable. So if you are using your equipment very means in a heavy duty usage, the controller needs to take more power or more current from the control battery and convert it and give it to the motor. So one thing that we have seen is that if we stretch the usage, now how are we need to understand here, how are we stretching the usage? If your equipment is working in a heavy application kind of usage, and you are not means the battery is not properly charged, the current required is more. In that case, the controller will have to pull more current from the battery, which stretches its working zone, creates overheating, because your motor needs that power to run. And we all know that as the voltage decreases, the current increases. So that extra current which it is getting is overheating the controller to fulfill the demand of the motor, which in turns means not damages but wears out the internal components of the controller more faster and results in a controller damage. So that is one part. Second part is now it is again, see, it is linked to both of our modules. Your energy source, if you are not maintaining our energy source, if you are not charging and discharging it properly, or using a deep discharge battery at the continuously, then that is affecting my motor, that is affecting my controller. If there is some problem with the motor, if there is a kind of brake jam, or there is some the bearing got the motor bearing is damaged and we are not attending to it, or we are trying to overcome a road which is not very healthy, or we are trying to overload the equipment. At such points, the controller will demand more power. When we demand more power, the controller has to stretch its operating zone, and at that point of time, the at up to some point of time it will meet the requirement, and after such point of time it will gradually lose and get damaged.
Okay. Okay. So the next question which is come in is, can we adjust the brake liners ourselves as users, or is it something that OEM should be called for?
So see, we actually covered means not this part, but regarding this part in our earlier webinar, where we talked about that there are certain customers, there are certain users who has their maintenance staff. Now we are every time there for providing technical assistance, for providing any kind of support that the customer needs, the customer wants, and to do that. As the brake liner adjustment thing is done, if the customer is having a kind of maintenance, a proper maintenance setup and maintenance staff, it can be done by themselves. If it is not, then we are more than happy to help anyone at any time of any point of time.
Okay. Next is something like, how often must the electrolyte and specific gravity be checked in batteries? Like, what is the time period? Is it every day, once a week? What is the frequency?
I would say it is once a week. If you are doing it, it's more than enough. But at the same time, if your battery is performing optimally, you are maintaining the battery properly, the cleanliness of it, the equalizing charge scheduling of it. If you are doing all this, it's okay if you are if we are checking the electrolyte level or specific gravity once a week. But at any point of time, if you see there is a water spillage, the electrolyte spillage, or there is boiling for whatsoever reason, then I think it should be done at a more regular, at a more regular interval of 2-3 days or something like that. If there is a boiling, we need to add water immediately. We cannot keep the plates very open and exposed to air. So if the water level is low, or because see what happens is, when we are charging or discharging, when we are charging the battery, we need to open the vent plugs. Now that is in most of our battery, that is one of the practices that is followed. Now while the battery has charged, while taking it off, we can have a look at all the cells, and while closing the caps, we can have a look at all the cells, and if any cell needs some top up, or if that is required, that can be done on a daily basis. Otherwise, checking the specific gravity, it can be done once a week. That is more than enough. Also, when we are talking about this part, I would like to add that regarding the batteries, when we are putting it on charge, like we have used the equipment for one shift, and now it is 80% discharged, we need to put it on charge. So when we are bringing it to the charge station, we should give some time for the battery to cool down, because it has worked. There has been continuous chemical reaction inside the battery, which has created some kind of heat in the battery when it was working for the last 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever the time period it was working. So we should give some time for the battery to cool down and then put it on charge. Same when we are bringing out the battery, taking out the battery from charge. Now, because of those 8 or 11 hours of charging, the battery is now hot, and there is still that reverse chemical reaction is going on. So we should avoid the practice of removing it from a charge and directly connecting it to the equipment. We should give some time. It can be 10-15 minutes or whatever, depending on the feasibility of the user. We should give some time for the battery to cool down. Now, when it cools down means the chemical reaction which is going on inside the battery will gradually stop, and then again the temperature of the battery will come down, and then when we connect it to the equipment, it will again start that chemical reaction for giving out the power, and we can do it, we can get the more out of the battery. So there should be a cooling period between discharge and charge and discharge.
Okay, I think that's comprehensively answered. So the next question is about fuel filters. That are these fuel filters sufficient to tackle issues with adulterated fuel? Like, will they be able to help in case fuel is not really unadulterated?
So fuel filters to some extent does that, but again, the first question comes is, are we selecting the right fuel for our equipment? Like we suggest to use high-speed diesel. Are we using 100% high-speed diesel? And then what is our transportation process? What is our storage process? And then what is our refilling process into the equipment? So how good these three practices are. See, every filter has some micron level, and every filter has some sort of thing. And how good are we maintaining that timely replacement of the filter? It will take care of it if there are physical contaminations. If we are mixing, or if you are blending two oils, or if you are using some kind of additives, or if there is something means from the source only, if we are not getting very healthy fuel, then, or if there is something like, I will give you with an example. If there is a tank which you use for bringing fuel and storing. Now, if that tank is not properly labeled and someone comes and mixes some other oil into it, like some used up engine oil or something, it is because it is not properly labeled, and some because of scarcity of time, someone has kept it at a place where it is not supposed to be, and someone has mixed something into it. So your filter cannot take that part out of it. It can take out those physical contaminations, but that's why labeling, proper transportation and proper storage is very important for having that after we choose the right fuel for feeding our equipment the right and unadulterated fuel, which gives us that performance and gives us that optimum performance of the engine. So yes, that is it.
Right. So the next question is that how do we know that the suction strainers are choked? Is it part of the periodic checking process, or is there some other way to know that?
See, suction strainer cleaning is a part of periodic process. Now, suction strainers are cleaned, and they are while you are replacing the hydraulic oil, it needs to be cleaned and replaced, if required, replaced. But at the same point of time, we need to understand that when an operator is working, like when we are driving our car, we sort of in an subconscious way or unconscious way, not unconscious, sorry, subconscious way, we talk to our car. Now, the similar thing happens when an operator is using the MHE. Now, if there is a kind of noise which is coming from the pump, it is not getting the oil properly, or because it is choked, so it is bound to make some noise. Now, how effectively are we recognizing that noise and taking an action on it will will ascertain that whether the suction strainer or the tank needs cleaning or not. And the second part of it, there is a scheduled thing which is done when you are replacing the hydraulic oil. You should clean or replace the suction strainer as required.
Right. Now, the next question is about, like, it's a very theoretical question, but I think it's important. What is equalizing charge in batteries? Just somebody wants to understand.
Okay, so equalizing charge means, see, as I told you that batteries bank of cells. There are for like each cell is a 2-volt entity. Now, if we are using a 24-volt system, then there will be 12 cells. If we are using 48-volt system, there will be 24 cells and so on. So each cell has its own kind of unique strength. Theoretically they should be on the same level, because given the shape, size and the composition of it, it should be same. But at the same time, ideally it should be same, but it is not. There is some minor variations on the front. So these 12 or 24 cells, when they operate together, they try to give the power together in their means collaboratively. Given that if there are some cells which are on a weaker front than the other ones, so because of they means being weaker tends to degrade faster than the other cells. So if you check the specific gravity and or the per cell voltage of each cell, you will notice there are minor differences. So those differences are because of those 1 or 2 or 3 a little weaker cell than the others which are available. Now what we equalizing charge does is it flows steady current, steady constant current to the battery, which brings all the cell together. Because when this equalizing charges is happening, the cells which are weaker will get more attention than the other, the strengthier or the healthier ones. So they can come back to the same level as the healthy cells, and again they will be at the same level once the equalizing charge is complete, or till the time we keep it on equalizing charge. The steady current will make sure that all the cells come back to the same level, and they are working as one entity, giving optimum power required by the equipment.
Okay. So the next question is with regards to load handlers, like the mast that we spoke about. So during daily checks, what are the various aspects which can be actually checked by the users, and what should be they vigilant about? Like how do they check the links? What is the various parameters that they should check before calling the OEM for doing a detailed study of the load handler?
Okay, so as I covered in a slide, that visual inspection on the pre-shift visual inspection is one of the most important aspect of our maintenance. Now, and the second part, when we are talking about hydraulics, I told that at least once a day you should you should fully extend your mast, so that your piston rods, the dust settled on the piston rods can be cleaned and they can be lubricated. So these two things are they are synonymous kind of. So when you are doing your pre-shift inspection or visual inspection, after that, if you are extending the mast to full height, the play can be noticed. So if there is any play, that can be noticed. Second is the chain tightness. The chain tightness can be noticed while during going around the machine or doing the visual inspection, where you can feel if it is too tight or too loose. Normally it becomes too loose because with usage of the machine, the chain, the elasticity means it gets stretched a bit and the chain tends to get a bit longer. So that can be felt while doing the pre-shift inspection. The thing on the carriage and the rails, it can be just inspected by eyes, that if there is any kind of cracks or any kind of damage that has happened. The carriage stoppers. The carriage stoppers are the one which prevent your carriage to come out from the mast. So they should be also be checked before starting the shift, if they are in place. It is at a height, you cannot touch and see it, but you can see if they are at place. If they are not, it should ring a bell that my carriage can go out of the mast. So these are the visual checks that we can see on the mast, and we can if these issues are faced, they must consider to connect with the OEM.
Right. So the next question which has come in is that, like, the practices for battery maintenance has been well covered. Is there something that we need to be careful about as far as chargers are concerned, like daily checks or periodic checks? Chargers.
Okay, so regarding chargers, there are two things I would like to say about the chargers. First is, depending on the operations and depending on site, we may have a number of equipment. We may have additional batteries, and then we have chargers. So the first thing is, we must ensure that we have enough number of chargers. Why I am saying is that at times we have seen that we have equipments, we have additional batteries, but we don't have enough chargers. So what happens over there is that we are stretching the chargers. Like 24 hours a day, the charger is working. One or the other battery is put it on charge. Now what happens over there? That as I told you, every battery requirement is different, and the battery is when you are connecting the battery, it is at a different charge level. Every battery will be at a different charge level. So the charger is not getting enough time to cool down, first of all, and second is, it is not getting enough time to come back from that state. Like when we start charging, the amount of current pushed is high, which gradually decreases as the charging comes to an end. Now, at a given point of time, you take out that battery and connect another battery. Now the charger has to again go back to that high current peak current zone. So see what is happening. The charger is stretching out because of giving different current needs to different batteries. So first and foremost thing is, we must have enough chargers for charging our battery. The second point is that we must keep the charger clean and the cables healthy. There is no lubrication or no other kind of maintenance that is happening, but we must keep the chargers clean, and so that there is no dust covering up the charger and it is going inside, which I will tell you what will happen into that. And second is, we must keep the cables healthy. So what is happening is that the chargers are fixed, the cables are fixed. When we are attaching and deattaching, sometime we tend to go on the our leg goes on the charger cables, and it also gets that wear and tear. So I have seen at many places that it is bound up with some kind of red tape, or so these things should be avoided, because they again adds to your leakages. They again adds to your heating, overheating, and at times they will they can create short circuit. They can do all sort of safety issues, create all sort of safety issues, which can again damage your charger and battery. If not, they for sure will increase your energy spent. That is one part. Second part is, if the charger is not clean, then it is not getting enough air to cool down. if it is not cooling down, the temperature zone of the different component of the charger may affect the charger in a very affect the charger adversely, and with time you will see the charger failing or the charger not charging properly or something like that. So for the charger, these three things are very important. First is have enough charger. Second is keep your charger clean. Third, have healthy and good cables connected to the charger.
Right. So I think very well covered, Bhaskar. So the next question which has come in is pretty interesting, that in terms of tires being replaced, we spoke about tires being replaced as soon as they are worn out to avoid higher maintenance cost. So the question is that do all tires need to be changed together, or it can be depending on which tire is worn out, only that should be changed?
Depending, see, I would say there is no perfect answer to it, depending on how what is the wear level of all the other three tires. So if suppose for a hypothetical example, I will take that one tire has worn out fully. I will take it as 100%. Other three tires are at 70%. So if you are fixing a new tire in place of that 100% tire, the others, there will be a wobbly effect that you will feel. But at the same time, if these three tires are not are below 50% kind of, I would say, then it's okay to just replace one tire. So depending on what is the wear level of the other tires that we have, or the one more thing that can be done is, if you are change the front tires together or rear tires together. So that is how it should be managed, on basis of what is the wear level of the other tires that are available.
Okay. So the next question is regarding batteries again. That how do we know that a battery is due for replacement, and we should not use it anymore, or our cost will go higher?
Okay, so 2-3 indicators that I would say is, first is the life cycle of the battery is over, which is as per OEM it is around 1000 to 1200 cycles. So for that I need to just briefly tell what is a cycle. So once charging and discharging is a cycle, or one discharge and then a charge is a cycle. So this charge and discharge cycle, so as per OEM it is 1000 to 1200 cycles, that is the lifetime. So one is your lifetime, and after that lifetime also, if you are getting enough backup out of it, then it's okay to use it. If you are not getting enough backup out of it, your battery is heating, abnormal heating is there in your battery when you are charging or when you are using it, that is an indicator that you should change it. Then if you're during your daily checks or weekly checks, you see that some of the cells are not properly are not giving the best out of them, their pulsate voltage have decreased to a level, then we can also go for changing those cells. But depending on what is the what is the total life of the battery that it has already covered, that action can be taken, that whether to replace cells or the whole battery. But if your battery is not giving proper backup and has gone through its life, and uh, it's overheating, these are some of the indicators that that can be taken into consideration for changing it.
Right. So one of the questions which has come in is, what are the checks for MHE and how many checks in a year? So this is just a question. Maybe I'll try to clarify that the way I understand it, that as recommended by OEM, what can be the what should be the frequency of check by the OEM in a year? If I want to clarify this question which has been posted, roughly 6 times, 8 times. What is it? How many preventive visits are generally given by an OEM or recommended by an OEM?
So normally, if my understanding is correct, we are trying to inform that how many times OEM can gives its visits for maintenance of the equipment. So it is on a I will say on a bi-monthly basis or a 500 hours cycle. So that is what I would say. And 6 times a year is good kind of intervention from an OEM to the on the machine.
Okay. Now, I think the next question is very specific that are there any particular maintenance practices which are different for MHE working in cold storages? Is there something which users need to know or do differently for cold storages MHE?
Again, this is a specific operation specific and site specific maintenance. So it has to be curated depending on what kind of operation, what is the load they are handling, what is the cold storage that we have. And so this needs to be curated depending on the equipment that is working and overall. But one thing that is general for cold storage application is park the equipment in anteroom always. Second, you need to keep a good eye on the charging, because in cold environment the battery discharges quicker than usual. And the third thing is that clean your machine or keep your machine clean as much as possible, because one thing that affects the equipment in cold environment is precipitation or condensation. It's condensation. So the moisture which settles on the equipment condenses and forms water, and that is one of the major reason of issues coming in cold storage. So these are the 2-3 things that we need to always keep your park your equipment in the anteroom. Don't take it into a larger temperature variation, like from -20 to +50 or 30 or 40, whatever it is. So yeah, use it in that temperature zone, park it in anteroom, keep an eye on the charge, and keep your machine as clean as possible and free from the humidity and the condensation part.
Right. So I think we are at the end of our time slot now. So we would like to bring this event to a close. Before we do that, I think one of the pointers that I would also like to add here is that whatever we sort of shared today was part of the regular and recommended maintenance practices by any OEM. But at the same time, there is also the need to have fair working conditions for any MHE to work seamlessly and most productively, because the maintenance cost and the related sort of expenses will go higher if the working or operating conditions are not conducive to the operations of the equipment. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bhaskar Nandi for sharing his time and thoughts on this very, very important topic. And before everybody leaves, there is a feedback link which has been posted on the Q&A section. We would request you to kindly share your valuable feedback on how did you like this session, what are the improvements that you would like us to undertake, and you can also mention if you want us to undertake any specific topic in our forthcoming sessions. With that, I would once again thank everybody for taking time out, uh, and we wish everybody a safe and healthy living. Thank you so much.
Also, thank everyone for listening to me and giving me this opportunity to speak and taking this forward. Thanks a lot.